Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Top Leaders Live. I'm Jen Anderson, and I am on a mission to help tech leaders to become the tech leader that everyone wants to work for. And today I get the wonderful opportunity to interview Sravan and talk about his personal brand as we do a personal brand highlight. So before we start talking about Sravan, I just want to let the listeners know that if anything I'm talking about here today really resonates with you, get in touch. Go ahead and go to the comments section, send a message there. You can DM me, or you can find me at movingforwardsolutions.com. Click on the Let's Talk button, and we can get in touch and talk about what you can do for yourself to become that tech leader that everyone wants to work for. So let me tell you a little bit about my esteemed guest here. So Sravan leads strategy, vision, and execution of enterprise data services team at Guardian. He has a rather interesting background and played leadership roles across product, design, and business analysis. He is passionate about innovation and a believer of leading with empathy. Sravan, welcome to today's Top Leaders.
Hi, Jen. I'm so excited to be talking to you today.
Yeah, it's awesome. It is really good to have you here. And thanks again for coming on board and talking about personal brands. So in your words, what would you say a personal brand is?
I think a personal brand is who people will recognize you by just kind of saying, if I talk about Sravan, this is what he is. These are the three things come to my mind, or one thing comes to my mind, and that's what personal brand is. Mm-hmm. Just like any company, if you talk about Amazon, you talk about one thing. If you talk about, let's say, healthcare companies, that there is this picture people create, and that's what brand is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. Thanks. So then also in your words, what would you say a personal brand is not?
I think a personal brand or something that is not a personal brand is necessarily things you put out there. Like you're trying to tell a story. The story may have elements of who you are, but that itself may not be a personal brand, right? And I think when you talk about something that is not a personal brand, maybe an example that comes to my mind is I like to play sports. It's a very general statement. That's not my brand, but how I play the sports, what level of interest I show in it starts to encompass and kind of communicate who you are. You're a competitive person, you are a go-getter, you want to do so much more. And that, I think that's the difference between like a brand and something that may not be classified as brand.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. I love it. So that's a perfect way to look at it, right? Because a lot of times people think that their brand is what they do. So the doing might be playing tennis. I know you're a big tennis buff and you've got your tennis prodigy in your household. We may or may not talk more about that in a moment, but it's not about tennis. That is not your brand. That's not the brand of your son, right? It's how you go about coaching tennis. It's how you go about playing tennis, right? And I love how you talked about that because, and for the listeners, obviously insert whatever your favorite sport is. We're just talking about tennis because Sravan loves tennis. He loves tennis, you guys. It's like a thing, and so, but where I'm going with this is that a lot of times we get so attached to my brand is the thing that I do, right? So my brand is a tech leader. My brand is a VP of product, or it's like, no, that's what you're quote unquote doing. Forgive the air quotes.
Correct.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So good. So thank you for delving into that a little bit. So you've got a pretty full world in your life. You're married, you got little humans running around, you're working full time, all of these things. And so when you were thinking about your week, what are some of the kind of the big things that are the most pressing to you as this leader, as somebody who's saying, I want to live my life. I want to live this big, interesting life. But what really is driving you? What's that thing? It's like that shiny, bright light that that's keeping you focused.
I think honestly, at the end of the day, it boils down to priorities. And how I could land or think about my priorities is with the help using the lens of my personal brand. So I'll reveal to everyone my personal brand is beyond, which is really thinking the future, being on the moon, imagining something amazing, expanding the human potential. Those are the type of things that drive my interest, that pique my interest, and I'm always thinking about those, no matter what conversation. So when I think about day to day, that's what I think about. And when I think about, again, you gave the example of my son playing tennis, and he's really into it, and we are as a family into it. And I've started to say, you know what, I think at the end of the day, every conversation I have, I still have to go beyond. Everything I do, I have to demonstrate that I'm going beyond, and I'm bringing the best out of others at the same time, right? So I felt like if you can prioritize what's important to you and how your brand aligns to it, and things that don't align, just let them go. I think that's the message here. If your brand is this guardrail that's helping you walk the right lines and showcase the right amount of energy towards the things you really want to do, right? That's how I see my day to day, and I keep reprioritizing every day, and that's helping me a lot.
That's great. So for context, what does your team look like? You obviously don't have to give us, tons of breakdown and proprietary information, but what's your team, people you're interacting with, those reporting to, et cetera? What does that look like? So it might help those who are listening to get a feel for what you have your hands in there at Guardian right now.
Absolutely. I mean, at Guardian, I run an enterprise team, which means basically we touch every part of the company when it comes to data. Again, data is literally in every project. I support nearly 90 different team members. I kind of do this. You can say this is like the mass collaboration of understanding where the company wants to go, and then how do you execute on a day-to-day basis, right? So I think my world is really fluid right now with so much happening in data and analytics. There is so much to learn. There is so much growth, not just at Guardian, but even outside. And it's a really exciting time for data and analytics.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's talk about that. Enterprise level impact. You're talking to people in all these different areas. So can you give us an example of, your brand is beyond, you want to keep leveraging it, right? So how do you approach a conversation? I don't even want to say who a stakeholder might be. Whatever, you can share with us like the details, but give us an idea of what you do inside your mind so that when you're walking into that conversation or going to present at a meeting or whatever it is, how are you keeping that idea of your brand to help you with that presentation or that conversation?
Sure, absolutely. Actually, it does naturally just come to me. And because I'm always thinking about the future, I'm always thinking about the customer so much more, the end user, the customer. I'm always trying to go back to that. I'm always saying, what is in it for the customer? What is the big picture? I mean, immediately we can do two things today and tomorrow, but that's not enough to run a sustainable business. How can we think about what is 3 years down the line? Are we looking at the full picture? Right. So these are the type of questions I ask my team regularly.
Yeah.
And that translates to beyond, because that's not about today. It's not about today. It's about tomorrow, and it's about growth, and it's about change. And I think that these are kind of the words you'd hear from my mouth if you're in a business meeting.
Okay. All right. I love that idea for customer. And so, but there's internal customers, there's external customers. So where is that line for you?
I think both. So I support both the internal and external customers in the sense that internally, for example, we partner with compliance departments, legal departments. They want data. We are able to support them, walk in their shoes. They're dealing with operational processes and so on. So we have to really think hard on how can we eliminate kind of manual type of things, right? Whereas on the external side, our real customers who are buying our products and services, they are taking a completely different journey. They are thinking about, oh, I just had an experience with Amazon. What is it with Guardian, right? So I have to really put on a different hat, that their expectations are different, and we need to operate differently. I know they are sometimes interchangeable, Like if you can operate always like you're operating with an external customer, you can do a great job internally, but sometimes it doesn't make economic sense, right? So I think that's the kind of the difference between our external and internal customers.
I love that. It's so good. It's so interesting because I think a lot of times people say, oh, customers, and they're thinking that external, right? And so, but there are so many internal customers for sure, you know, to deal with. I love that. I love how you're thinking and thinking of the differences. What do they need, right? What is their next steps, and that beyond thinking. That's perfect. So we've talked a little bit about your family dynamics. You've got this big interest in tennis for your family, whatnot. What else, or excuse me, how else is your personal brand showing up in your personal life?
I think in my personal life, again, I think when I think about obviously doing a job, my mind is also thinking about what else can I do so I can stay more independent financially. So how else can I make things more stable for my family? And I know we probably picked one of the most expensive sports. That means I have to do way more than what I'm doing today. So I think from a beyond standpoint, when I think about beyond, even when I'm on a day-to-day basis interacting with my family members, I tend to go beyond in terms of, for example, I have family both here and in India. And somehow I have to always go beyond to connect everybody, those in India, with our lives here. And it is a day-to-day thing. It just doesn't come naturally to somebody. But I always feel like I can do it, so I will do it. So I feel like that's a good example of how I keep my family in India and family in the US together. And we're talking and we're sharing, you know, we're not, even though physically we're apart, mentally we're still in somewhat same place.
Yeah, I love that's so great. Right before we were recording this, we were talking about how you take time in your commute to connect with family members who are in India, and using that time wisely when you're in the car commuting and calling up your mom. And I'm sure there's other people that you call as well, you know, but that's a great example of using your time wisely. You know, one of the things that I'm thinking about is how when you were going through the training and the coaching with me, is I introduced you to Strengthsfinder and helped you to understand your top 5 strengths. And for those who don't know what Strengthsfinder is, it's an assessment that helps you understand where your strengths are at. So it doesn't say, oh, you're good at math, or you're good at let's say like nursing or something. It's not based off of a job. It's more based off of how you go about approaching things. And one of the things, Sravan, that I thought was so interesting is your number 1 strength is relator, which is all about connecting with people and having those deep connections so that you can accomplish great things together. And so I was curious, what have you noticed now that you understand about your strengths? And granted, I'm just highlighting, you know, your relator strength as your number 1, but what have you noticed now that you understand about your strengths, in particular relator, and how you're using that to help you be known as beyond?
Yeah, no, actually, great point. Strengthsfinder is definitely an assessment everyone out there should take. It's a very good way to reflect on who you are. It gives a path on, again, like Jen said, strengths and so on. In this case, relator was my number 1 strength, and that means I'm able to connect the dots. I'm able to connect to different people, and we all know how hard it is to kind of get things done if you don't have people on the same page. Yes. And my job has always been about clarifying, getting everybody on the same page, making it, and I feel like what that does is that automatically helps people bond and say, oh, this person always asks a good question. This person is willing to go above and beyond in what he's doing. He's not just worried about his own piece of work, right? So the way I see relator showing up is I actually chuckle sometimes is, wait, this actually showed up on Strengthsfinder. I'm in some meeting and suddenly something comes up and you're like, this was exactly the statement I saw in Strengthsfinder's comments. And that it feels good. It feels good that there is a connection between what I'm doing every day. There is a connection between what I want to do tomorrow. And then these words and letters are a way to articulate that.
Nice.
So yeah, definitely shows up a lot.
It's so great because I think somebody else could also potentially have a brand of beyond, right? But your strengths definitely feed into how your brand is going to show up too, right? And so that's like what I love about you is you're constantly talking about who are the people internally, who are the people externally, who are my family members locally as well as in India and whatnot. How can I connect with them? So because you're like thinking beyond, right? You're constantly thinking, I want that long-term great relationship with them. And so I think it's a really interesting dance where somebody else could have the beyond as their personal brand statement, you know, whatnot. However, they could have a completely different set of strengths, and that's okay. And that's going to help to drive how their beyond is going to show up. So yeah, it's just really interesting to see all of that coming together. So let's talk a little bit about how you're leveraging your personal brand to help you in the online world. What are you doing there?
I think in the online space, honestly, we are all facing a choice issue, right? There is so much out there. When I think about my brand and when I think about the choices I make, I've slowed down on the number of things I just pick randomly to say, go for quality over quantity. That's kind of been the message. And then there is no rush. That's the other part, because I feel like if you do think through what you want to either buy or experience, it's almost saying, do I really want it? Like, would I use this after 30 days? Would I use this after 100 days? And slowing down, I think slowing down is so important. I feel like if you don't slow down, there's no way for you to know who you are and what you're doing, whether it's right, whether it's wrong. And I feel like my brand helps me slow down a little bit and say, yeah, you don't have to sign up for everything. You don't have to do everything. You can choose what you want to do.
Yes.
So
yes. That makes me so happy to hear, for sure, because I think we do get stuck in that trap of we got to be busy, right? And that's what's going to drive my happiness. And yet in that busy, golly, are we stepping over huge opportunities to truly connect with people? So, and of course, you're a relator, you're all about let's have these awesome relationships, right? So I love that. So good. Has your personal brand showed up like on LinkedIn, for example? Are you using it in ways to help you there with positioning yourself online?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still trying to fully, I guess, articulate how it shows up in all the places. I am for now, I'm using it as a banner on my LinkedIn profile, so people know who I am. Because a lot of times when you look at somebody's resume or somebody's profile, there's so little information about who you are. But sometimes your brand statement or your brand word tells so much more about you, and at least intrigues others, right? I think that the point here is, how can I excite somebody else when they look at me, talk to me, want to have a chat with me, right? I think that's the whole point here is, can we have human to human connection? And that leads to something amazing, right? And that's, at the end of the day, that's what it is. And I feel like LinkedIn is a great platform, but I do take the opportunity whenever I meet with new people to kind of talk about brand. Like Jen, you've always said to us, ask their brand if they know it. If they don't know it, it's totally fine. But you can ask them other things. So that's exciting.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you're doing that. I'm curious around how you're leveraging that in conversations with other executives inside of the company, the piece about branding. How is that showing up for you?
So I'm being deliberate. Honestly, I'm being deliberate.
Nice. So
they understand the message, in that I'm telling them, hey, my brand is X, and I'm really looking forward to doing things like that. Like I want to position myself for like the next level growth. And because my brand is beyond, I'm willing to do a lot of things above and beyond what I do, my current capabilities, willing to learn, willing to adapt, willing to lead bigger, take more responsibility. So that's how, I mean, honestly, it's about being brutally honest with the other person that this is my brand. If you didn't know, but this is my brand, and I want to stand for it, and I want to do everything I can to demonstrate that I'm doing things that align with my brand.
Nice. That's good. So what are you hearing back from people? What's showing up on their end? Because I know this is what you're articulating to them, but what are you hearing back around what they're seeing around your brand, or as you share these thoughts with them?
I think it's interesting feedback. I mean, some folks are helping guide me. So when they're like, hey, if I'm thinking differently, then they are saying, hey, wait, aren't you like the Beyond Hat person? So let's talk about this, right? So sometimes if I miss the boat, they are helping me align
Nice.
the thought. So that's a good thing, because somebody is picking up the topic if I don't.
Yeah.
And then I'm also seeing people are like, wow, this suits you. This is you. Like I get the validation that this is exactly who you are, and your brand is so right. It really tells who you are. And from my friends and family, they're like, that's who you are. So
Great.
so it's a great sign of validation. Feels good too. So
that is fantastic. I'm over here grinning ear to ear as your coach, because I'm like, yes, they're seeing it, Sravan. That's a big deal. You went through the effort to determine what you want your brand to be. And now you're being that champion, right? You're being that ambassador for your brand, and they're seeing it. Oh, I love it. I love it. I literally have chills up my back right now for you. That's cool, because you're being, like, use that word, validated. That is fantastic. So good. I love to hear that. So what advice would you have for tech leaders out there, thinking about, golly, what am I doing with my career, personal brand? What would you want to share with them?
I think when I think about tech, most people are aspirational, right? They want to do so much more. They're willing to learn. I think they should not lose that spirit, no matter what comes their way, right? That's the number one lesson for me and for anybody else, is keep learning, stay positive, and make every situation look optimistic, so you can feel optimistic. Because I think that's what we all face at some point in our careers. We start feeling like we're not growing or not given the opportunity. I would flip that and say, this is the downtime for you to learn something really quickly, and then showcase your passion towards it, right? So I urge all the tech leaders to challenge themselves, to think big, to again ask the beyond questions every time they are in a tech discussion, because at the end of the day, everything we do from a tech standpoint enables our customers, our business to grow. So put yourselves in the customer's shoes every day, every minute.
That's awesome. I love it. I could just imagine you in a meeting right now, and everybody's like, let's do it. They're leaning in. So that is great. I love that aspirational encouragement. That is fantastic. Wonderful. Sravan, thank you so much for joining me for this personal brand highlight of you and your great brand of Beyond. And thank you for being here on today's Top Leaders.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thanks, Jen.
Absolutely. Thank you.